Good evening. In this broadcast, the information program Time. In Chechnya, despite the agreement on a temporary ceasefire affecting heavy types of weaponry achieved yesterday at the Russian-Chechen talks in the Cossack village Slipsovska, today isolated instances of crossfire continued. As a correspondent of Interfax reported from Grozny today at 1400 hours, artillery firing at the southern parts of the city, controlled by Chekhartadaev supporters, acquired a semi-intense nature. Previously, the Chechen side had dealt a blow from a multi-projectile launching system on locations of Russian tanks a few kilometers from the populated point Goyti, which is 20 kilometers southwest of Grozny. The director of the Federal Service of Counterintelligence, Sergei Stepashin, feels that the agreement on the temporary ceasefire regarding heavy types of weapons will unlikely lead to a full-scale truce in Chechnya. He noted that Chekhartadaev supporters will most likely attempt to use the ceasefire in order to win some time and regroup their forces. According to the press service of the government of Russia, units of the Ministry of Internal Affairs and the Russian Army are broadening their controlled territories to the south and west of Grozny. The situation remains complicated in Guverdarmes, where retreating Dadaev formations are concentrating in the Naterich and Naursk regions. Already, regional divisions of Internal Affairs of Chechnya are operating. RAI News reports formations of divisions of militia has resumed in the village Znamenskaya. The entire contingent of General Rokhlin, as of today, has left Chechnya, yielding its position to internal forces. Federal forces possibly will change their methods of conducting war. Interfax reports to avoid casualties among the peaceful population. A proposal is being considered that the subdivisions should not enter populated points but establish their block posts at access and egress points. Possibly bombing of populated points will stop altogether, but the decision on these questions in many ways depends on talks which began yesterday between the Dadaev's head of staff, Aman Mashadov, and the other side. Incidentally, in the opinion of General Rokhlin, talks will unlikely be successful in Dadaev's circle. There are many people whose hands are in blood and will not permit any wise steps to be made by Mashadov or Dadaev himself, Rokhlin said in an interview to Intertas. Overall expenditures on medical aid in the conflict region have already exceeded 34 billion rubles. On restoration of objects of Chechen energy system, according to experts, around 2 trillion rubles will be needed, Intertas reports. The restoration of normal energy feed, according to certain assessments, is possible this year. This will help expedite the restoration of destroyed objects on the territory of Chechnya. Pursuant to previously achieved agreements, the command of the group of federal forces in Chechnya, the Colonel General Anatoly Kulikov, tomorrow will conduct a second level of talks with the Dadaev's head of staff, Aslan Mashadov, Itatas reports. The meeting will be held in the Ingushetian airport, which is located in the Cossack village Ordzhonikidzevskaya. In Ingushetia, bodies of killed border troops were found. This was reported by an information agency of the Federal Border Services of Russia, noting that the individuals suspected of committing the crime have been arrested. The interred bodies of the military servicemen of the border troops, the ensign Gutsu and the private Rogozhin, with traces of gunshot wounds, were found last night on the fringes of the populated point Ali Yurt in Ingushetia. Our special correspondents Herman Salamatin and Alexei Matyushkin report on the situation on the Chechen-Dagestani border. The only border district of the Federal Border Service of Russia, the Caucasus district, has a unique status. Its base forces concentrated here are in Dagestan and Ingushetia. The basic mission set by the Security Council of Russia for the district is to seal the border with Azerbaijan and Georgia and also create a zone of a special border regimen along the entire stretch of the administrative border between Chechnya, Dagestan and Ingushetia. For these purposes, the district is fortified with a large number of personnel, combat technology, helicopter and border patrol ships operating along the equatorial belt of Dagestan and the Caspian Sea. In the most difficult conditions of winter and lack of roads, the district accomplished its missions and even ahead of time limits set by the Security Council. In the opinion of the Deputy Commander of the district, Major General Evgeny Bolkhavit, the district in the area of Dagestan, in 2 zones of the Russian-Azerbaijani border adjacent to Chechnya, is already fulfilling its objective in full scale. However, events in Chechnya press time, and in essence now the border troops are encountering separate individuals and groups of the Chechen gunmen. As resistance diminishes toward Russian federal forces in Chechnya, here on the border with Dagestan, the Russian border troops increasingly sense an escalating tension because their posts are located at the most likely exit routes used by gunmen leaving Chechnya. Of particular danger are the mercenaries from Azerbaijan, Egypt, Jordan and western Ukraine. The mercenaries from Azerbaijan, the Grey Wolves, are members of the Islamic semi-fascist organization and are operating in Chechnya with particular cruelty and fanaticism and will leave Chechnya with heightened frenzy because they know that for their deeds in Chechnya there will be no amnesty. The mission of the border troops is to not let them out, and those encounters, according to the intelligence here on the border with Dagestan and Ingushetia, will begin in the near future. Today, a press conference was held by the chairman of the Russian Union of Industrialists, Arkady Volsky, and the leader of the Party of Economic Freedom, Konstantin Borovoy. The need to express their attitude toward events in Chechnya united the two often rivaling politicians. We're different people, and at times we pinch each other, especially in the membership in the Komsomol. Events in Chechnya could activate fascist organizations and establish a dictatorship in Russia, Konstantin Borovoy feels. The rehearsal of destabilizing the situation in the country, according to him, will be held the 23rd of February. There could be raids on democratic organizations, newspaper publishing houses, which will require protective measures and the deployment of troops. Possibly this will be provocated by our special services, who are involved in difficult relations over the Chechen conflict and with people responsible for many crimes in the country. Arkady Volsky has a more skeptical attitude to the existence of a party of war. I feel it's not a party of war which has decisive significance, but a party of fools. And it's this party, in the opinion of Volsky, answers for the adoption of rash decisions in Chechnya, but Volsky refused to name individuals. The task force on Chechnya, which he heads, developed a plan to resolve the crisis. They proposed the formation of a coalitionary government involving all political forces, including Dudayev supporters. Volsky stated that it's necessary to create neutral zones in the Republic. Today, from the Minister of Defense, he received agreement to create the first such zone in the Shatoyevsky region. In the opinion of the participants of the press conference, the Chechen crisis will cost Russia $40 billion. In connection with the decision of the National Assembly of Estonia to recommend that the Estonian government recognize the Chechen Republic and Chukotka at the first possible opportunity, the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs issued a statement today in which it assessed this as a fostering of separatist manifestations in Russia. The Prime Minister of Estonia, Andres Tarand, according to Interfax, stated that he does not feel the recognition of Chechnya as possible in the near future. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia expressed condolences in connection with the death in Algeria of a Russian citizen, Nikolai Pismenuk, who was killed by unidentified people on the 10th of February. In connection with the occurrence, the ambassador of Algeria in Moscow was called to attend to the Foreign Affairs Ministry, to whom a corresponding declaration was made. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia again recommended to Russian departments to dramatically decrease the number of specialists on assignment in Algeria and completely refrain from sending family members. In countries incidentally called the near abroad, the situation is even more turbulent than in Algeria. A new series of brutal murders and terrorist attacks swept through Tajikistan. Literally in one day, in Dushanbe, 2 military servicemen of the 201st Russian Motor Artillery Division were shot, killed in cold blood. The junior Sergeant Alexander Kalinin and the private Sergei Kurtyak. 17 kilometers from the capital on a mountain road, a group of gunmen of the opposition ambushed a vehicle with 2 civilians. One of them was shot on sight. The second, with serious injuries, was taken to hospital. Here, the bodies of the 2 border troops were found at the Moscow Border Regiment, brutally murdered. The sergeants Hakin and Khalibulov and Rustam Karimov on the same day in the Kalayhumsk region. On the stretch of the Tajik-Afghan border, 4 Russian border troops hit a mine and were blown up. One more murder shook the capital. Yesterday, next to his house, a vehement opponent of the Islamic fundamentalism, the cleric Mulos Sadridian, was killed. And the last tragic news came when we were completing preparation of this report. In the Pinjikensk region, 2 people died from food poisoning, and 59, among whom there are many children, were hospitalized. The reason for the poisoning was the use of substandard flour delivered by a private entrepreneur from Samarkand. Because of all data compiled by law enforcement organs of the Republic and the military prosecutor, criminal cases have been filed. Today in St. Petersburg, the meeting of the Council of the Interparliamentary Assembly of the CIS was held. Judging from initial impressions, this session could be called very fruitful. Either it was the time of the beginning, which played a role at the beginning of the year, or the results of the latest summit in Almaty. In any case, the parliamentarians managed to examine today more than 20 questions. Many of them are of an economic, social, and cultural character and have great significance for the development of cooperation within the Commonwealth. They've developed a joint proposal to increase the exposure of the activities of the international parliamentary committees and the national parliaments, to create a council of directors of state information agencies of the CIS. What did you manage to do during the last year, and what do you plan for the future? We managed the most important thing, in my opinion, to apply the Interparliamentary Assembly to what's hoped will be its peacekeeping action, and one more important event occurred as a model. The law on the civil code was adopted. We all understand that the more economic integration there is between our countries, the closer the moment of political integration will come. Re-elected as chairman of the Council of the Interparliamentary Assembly of the CIS countries, and unanimously, was the chairman of the higher chamber of the Russian parliament, Vladimir Shumeyko. The chairman of the Council of the Interparliamentary Assembly is elected for a term of 1 year. Political speculation, the aide of the president of Russia, Georgy Satarov, called news which appeared in the press about a presidential faction in the Duma created on the initiative of Boris Yeltsin. In an interview to a correspondent of Vitar-TASS, he only confirmed the circumstances in the end of last week when the deputies of several factions of the Duma indeed invited presidential aides to the Desna, a lodge in suburban Moscow, where they consulted on platform objectives of the new deputy structure in the works. Its creation is planned by members of the recently disbanded deputy group, the Liberal Democratic Union of the 12th of December, the faction New Regional Policy, Russia's Choice, Democratic Party of Russia, and the independent deputies. The closer the parliamentary elections, the more actively deputies are fighting for their future seats. And incidentally, this battle, as often with scandalous tones, unfolds not only between factions, but within them. And now one of these Duma conflicts is in full rage. The essence is that Russia's Choice intends to recall from the post of the chairman of the Committee on Organizing the Work of the Duma, Vladimir Bauer, who is a member of their faction. By the initially because Bauer received an apartment in a prestigious Moscow building, but as even Bauer himself feels, and the leader of Russia's Choice, Igor Gaidar, the reasons are more complex. Among them, Vladimir Bauer cites the fact that the faction, which was considered to be the presidential faction, recently changed its course dramatically, and now Russia's Choice is in the grips of fever. And because of the approaching elections, deputies of other factions are nervous. Also, Russia's Choice is not happy that the chairman of the committee isn't pursuing the faction's line. The main blow was dealt for political reasons. I, having been elected to this post from the faction Russia's Choice, am not pursuing my faction's line in this post. And I state, yes, I say I did not pursue it, nor have I intention of pursuing the line. I'm prepared to secede from my faction in order to remove all insinuations around this topic. From the arsenal of Soviet times, which long ago were recognized as stagnant, a reason permeated with the scent of mothballs is extracted, the receipt of an apartment. Thank God, a sufficient number of deputies have received and are receiving them in that building so as to not create a tension around one, a service apartment with the right of occupancy until the expiration of the term in office for 10 months until the 1st of January 1996. There were many reasons, and the reasons were varied, but the faction had quite serious criticism against the performance of the committee. It performed satisfactorily in the initial phases of its capability in the functioning of the Duma, but later, in our view, quickly squandered its role as a controlling body over the bureaucratism in the apparatus, the excesses in the apparatus, and control over the absence of privileges in the deputies' midst. A decision was adopted to recommend that he be replaced with another representative from our faction, Valentin Ivanovich Trepchuk, according to the principle of a new broom. How this principle will work, it's not known, especially since the proposal of the faction will only be submitted for discussion by the entire Duma. During 1 year of existence, there were precedents and dismissals of its chairman of committees before. There were demands for the resignation of Zatulin, the resignation of Yushchenkov was 3 times voted on in the Duma. Not less than 3 times the question was raised on the dismissal of the chairman of the State Duma, and several times his deputy, Zhirinovsky, offered to dismiss the chairman of the Committee on Security, Ilyukhin, and the chairman of his own committee, elected from his faction, the Committee on Geopolitics, Ustinov, and the faction Russia's Choice initiated talks on the possible recall of the chairman of the committee, Poltoranin. Analysis has indicated that the political lines of factions and parties are in contradiction with the professional activities of those committees. Indignant because of such an attitude toward them, the chairman of the committees are preparing a special address to be delivered to the Duma in the near future. The lives of millions of Russians are threatened because of the absence of insulin. The information of the Ministry of Healthcare on this account does not correspond to reality. At a press conference dedicated to this topic, our correspondents were invited by the Russian Diabetic Association. If one describes the situation with diabetes in Russia in one word, it can be called catastrophic. This is a quote from the press release issued to the press. This was also said by scientists and specialists. The lives of 8 million citizens of Russia, that is the number of diabetics in our country, are literally on the point of the needle of an insulin syringe. Until recently, they, at least by half, but at least were supplied with high-quality foreign insulins. Now, the firms supplying these vital serums have been boycotted. One more quote. The issuing of licenses to importers of insulin has been suspended. Hundreds of thousands of people are on the verge of perdition among the afflicted. Panic has begun. The decision to block deliveries of foreign insulins, adopted by the Ministry of Healthcare of the medical industry, Eduard Nechayev, is connected with the fact that in Maikop, certain small companies have established production to purify domestic pig-derived insulin with subsequent storage in test tubes for some reason in Poland. Neither doctors nor patients believe in the success of the Maikop insulin, but the minister insists on immediate purchase of 1.5 million tubes of this agent. Why? I don't know the answer to that one. Someone probably knows. Usually, any new agent, prior to be used in broad practice, under the aegis of the Pharmaceutical Committee, undergoes clinical testing. The Maikop insulin was not tested. This explains the alarm of the doctors and patients. And there's one more curious coincidence. The willful implementation of the use of an untested agent coincided in time with the dismissal of the chairman of the Pharmaceutical Committee, Professor Babkov. Why? One more question, to which probably someone knows the answer. The Ministry of Roads and Transportation of Russia, as of tomorrow, will reduce by 50% tariffs to transport cargoes along railway routes to the Far East. These cargoes are fuel energy cargoes, that is grain, sugar, oil products. This discount is estimated over the year to be 300 billion rubles. Discounted tariffs will apply to deliveries over a 3,000-kilometer distance. As we learned today, simultaneously, from the 15th of February, the Ministry of Roads and Transportation will increase by 1.6 times tariffs for distant passenger fares. Today, the first Vice Premier of the Government of Russia, Alexis Skovets, was in Khabarovsk. The program of his business itinerary is quite saturated. It includes examination of several important domestic industrial objects, and the first of them is the railway bridge over Amur. The decision for its reconstruction was adopted by the Government of Russia in 1992. Serious attention, which the government of Russia devotes to the task of reconstructing the railway bridge over Amur in Khabarovsk, is required because this is the most narrow strip of the entire Trans-Siberian Railway. The bridge, after reconstruction, must become a two-track bridge, and then the capacity will correspond to the necessary volume of cargo along this strategically significant route. The reconstruction of the bridge should end in 1997. However, even now, construction teams are behind their schedules by 8 months, citing delayed financing. Here they expect that the visit of Alexis Skovets will help to resolve this problem. During this trip, the first Vice Premier has one more objective as well, which is not broadly distributed. It is the fact that to control use of budget funds allocated for concrete specific programs. It happens that these funds, having arrived in regions, are spent not by designation, but such violations cannot be concealed from the eyes of an experienced manager. Many of those in Moscow don't realize what's happening in the regions today. That's why these trips are simply indispensable. The Russian Pacific Fleet today sank in the assigned area of the Sea of Japan, near the coast of Primorye, almost 600 tons of written-off ammunition. Itatas was told in the press center of the Pacific Fleet. That includes written-off artillery projectiles and aviation bombs. This action was carried out in conditions of heightened secrecy. To the site of the sinking a few days ago, the transport ship Vologda set out. As we were told today over the phone in the press center of the Military Naval Fleet of Russia, this is yet a regular, planned operation conducted strictly within the framework of the international agreement. There were neither chemical nor bacteriological contents in the shells or bombs, so the world community has no reason for concern. We were assured by the head of the press service of the Military Naval Force, Alexander Viditiev, to the question why the ammunition is sunk on the seafloor and not exploded as usual. We were told that land demolition is more expensive and environmentally hazardous, dangerous for those carrying out the measure. The projectiles rest now at a depth of 2,800 meters and present no danger for for the flora and fauna of the Japanese Sea. One may agree with this if one considers the fact that this is not the first such burial here, and no repercussions for now, if indeed the ammunition contains only TNT. However, it's not clear why the action was cloaked in more secrecy than usual, and the public learned from Iturtas, not from the direct statement of the heads of the military naval force. Also, one more question arises: are we so rich so as to dump tons of explosive and metals into the sea, like wishing coins? Because in Russia long ago, technology was developed which allows the processing of TNT into a highly durable plastic, which can be used to make bulletproof vests. Of course, money is needed for everything, but as the folk saying, caution against fast gain and eventual loss. As we were told in the Neo-Oceanology department, scientists don't yet know the results of thousands of tons of sunken TNT on us and our seas in 80 or 100 years. As we've already reported in the end of the week last week, near Kiev, an N-70 plane crashed. Details in our report from Ukraine. The N-70 is the pride of Ukraine. The idea of its creators was that it, with cruiser speed, should have entered the world market. You see the films of its first flight. The fourth flight for the N-70 was to be the last. The reason for the crash is being investigated by several commissions. According to the workers of the plant, the tempos for the preparations of the N-70 for the first flight were too ambitious. Since it was brought out of its hangar, only half a year passed by. For the preparations of even simpler types of planes for air tests, much more time is spent. However, what happened is known only by the black box. It was found and opened, but the results of the tapes are not yet known. According to unverified reports, the N-70 began to lose control in the air and asked the escort plane, the N-72, with research apparatus on board, to approach closer and see what happened. But the malfunction of the steering equipment interrupted in completing this maneuver. As of today, the official reason for the crash of the plane is as follows. The N-70 and its escorting N-72 collided mid-air. The escort plane survived miraculously, and only because of the mastery of the pilots. The burning plane was landed in Gostomel. The N-70 crashed completely, and none of its 7 crew members managed to catapult out. Now, you see all of them here alive. These films are from a press conference after the first triumphant flight. On this cemetery, there will be 7 more tombs. In the last 3 years, from the aviation team of the Antonov plant, 28 people have died. Almost half of them are all the test pilots employed at the plant. More than 2.5 million crimes were registered in Russia during the last year. And although it's a little lower than in 1993, the number of serious crimes has jumped by 11%. Today in Rostov-on-the-Don, the terrorists were sentenced who, in December of 1993, took school children hostage from the Rostov High School number 3. Then the helicopter with the hostages on board from Rostov through Krasnodar went through to the Mineral Waters Airport, where the basic events unfolded to free the children. A few hours later, the terrorists were detained in Makhachkala. This operation lasted for more than 100 hours and ended without blood. However, in determining the sentences, the court was guided by materials of the case connected with enormous danger to the public and the unprecedented crime against the lives of a group of children. 5 out of these 6 defendants received prison terms from 10 to 15 years, and the head of the gang, Musa Almamedov, who is nicknamed the Cossack, was sentenced to an exclusive method of punishment, a firing squad execution. All the veterans and participants of the Great Patriotic War who live in Moscow must have and will receive housing by the 50th anniversary of the victory over the fascist Germany. The mayor of the capital, Yuri Lushkov, called this the most important action of the Moscow government. Half a century ago, Prague, for the first time during the years of the Second World War, was bombed by the Anglo-American aviation. The attack lasted only 3 minutes, but the bombs dropped on residential quarters of the city, took the lives of more than 700 people. Much more tragic were the results of the blanket bombings of Dresden. The half-century anniversary of the last bombing comes today as well. During these days, 50 years ago, one of the most monstrous acts of vandalism was committed in the history of the Second World War. On the night from the 13th to the 14th of February, the English and American aviation erased the German city, Dresden, from the face of the earth. The Florence on the Elbe, it was called in Europe, and not only for its remarkable beauty. World fame was brought to to it by its art gallery, in which masterpieces of European art were kept, including works by Raphael, Tiziano, Rembrandt, Velasquez. From a military point of view, the bombing of Dresden was absolutely senseless. On the eve, British intelligence reported to the command, in the city there are no military objects except for the optical factory, it says. Currently, it's a haven for the refugees. Mostly they are women and children. But the fate of the city was predetermined. At 10 p.m. on the 13th of February, the first wave of bombers dropped onto Dresden 650 incendiary bombs. They turned the city into a total bonfire. Tens of thousands of people burned alive. Others died in excruciating suffering. Within a few hours, a second wave dumped onto the flaring city a ton of highly explosive bombs, and at noon, the 14th of February, the American aviation completed the task. Where Dresden stood, only baked brick dust remained. According to Western sources, as a result of this senseless intimidation action, 135,000 people died, 50,000 more than in Hiroshima. 197 paintings of the Dresden Gallery burned, which the Germans didn't manage to hide. During the years of the war, Hitler fascism committed terrible crimes against world culture. Coventry, Rotterdam, Warsaw, Petersburg, Pavlovsk, Tsarskoye Selo. All of they became victims of the blind hatred and cold calculating cruelty. In the end of the war, their fate was repeated by Dresden, and just as it will always remain for us not only a symbol of human barbarism, but a bitter reminder that people forget the lessons of history far too quickly. Today, the Prime Minister of Russia, Viktor Chernomyrdin, completed his official visit to Slovakia. The second and final day of the visit was dedicated to protocol functions. The Prime Minister laid wreaths to the monuments of the Soviet soldiers and the heroes of the Slovak national uprising, and later met with the chairman of the Slovak parliament. Of the planned 9 Russian-Slovak agreements to be signed, 12 were actually signed. The state delegation did everything possible to restore foreign economic ties. The current agreement, apart from everything else, removed certain artificial barriers, and so the countries have agreed to remove visa requirements for visits, mutual employment of their citizens, cooperation in the areas of science and technology. Meanwhile, the less known results of the talks are about major construction projects which are equally significant for both countries. First of all, a new branch of the transit gas pipeline. The term of the last agreement is to expire, and Slovakia is striving to broaden its role in the transit of gas. Domestic Gazprom wants to begin privatization of the gas refining company of Slovakia and open their own trade building here. The second project, the completion of a nuclear power station in Mochovca. The first block will be completed in 1997. On the base of the power station, a joint Russian-Slovak-French company will be created, and financing initially will be through credits allotted to Russia. The visit of the Russian Prime Minister ended with a meeting with business circles who used the occasion in a business-like manner in the auditorium to resolve their problems immediately. One must give them credit. They spoke in Russian. One of the most urgent questions is the liquidation of Russia's debt. As Viktor Chernomyrdin stated, basically debts can be covered through deliveries of special technologies, oil drilling equipment, and the capitalization of property on the territory of Russia. Today, the Prime Minister returned to Moscow. And problems of European security today were in the center of attention in the conversations of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Andrei Kozyrev, in the Swedish capital. As a member of the European Union, Sweden strives to expedite aid to Russia along the line of this organization. The Social Democrats, who are again in power, headed by the Prime Minister Carlson, demonstrate interest in developing closer partnership. Sweden is itself in a difficult economic situation. For example, its state debt is the most rapidly growing one among industrially developed countries. But the government has to resort to unpopular measures in order to decrease state expenditures, and at the same time Swedish authorities allocate funds to develop cooperation with the northwest of Russia and for the joint battle with organized crime. At the talks with the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Sweden, they discussed the problems of two-sided cooperation and in questions of international politics. Responding to the press on the reaction of Sweden to events in Chechnya, Len Wallen confirmed that Sweden hopes for an imminent resolution of the conflict through political means. Today, Andrei Kozyrev met met unofficially with the Prime Minister, Ingvar Carlsson, and the former Premier and currently the head of the oppositional Conservative Party, Carl Bildt. And during these moments in the British Embassy in Stockholm, a conversation between Andrei Kozyrev has begun with his British colleague, Douglas Hurd. Israeli security forces on the west bank of the Jordan River are in the state of high alert. This is done because of the anniversary today of the mass murder of Palestinians by a Jewish settler near the mosque in the city Hebron. As is known, as a result of that tragedy, more than 40 Arabs died and almost 60 were injured. The terrorist himself was killed on sight by Palestinians. In the capital of Bangladesh, severe clashes occurred between the police and protesters, workers of the textile industry. As a result of the clashes, 5 people have died, several hundreds have been injured. Demonstrations were held in the framework of the extended campaign of insubordination begun on the call of the professional unions. Today, the population of China has reached 1,200,000,000 people, ITARTAS reported. If the policy of strict restriction of birth rate had not been conducted, the number of residents of the CNR would have exceeded the indicated mark 9 years ago and now would be in excess of 1,400,000,000. The family planning campaign is being conducted on a countrywide scale since 1973. And now we invite the viewers of our program to visit the Tretyakov Gallery. You have a chance to be the first to see the works of Vrubil, which for almost 90 years were hidden from the eyes of the public. Truly, as a long-awaited premiere in the Tretyakov Gallery in the auditorium, especially built for Vrubil's works, if you remember, on the site of the former interior courtyard of the Tretyakov Gallery, finally on the wall a panneau, the Princess of Dreams. It was painted on the theme of Rostan, the prince daydreamer who all his life searched for the princess of his dreams and who finally saw her in his final moments before death. This painting was commissioned to Vrubil for the Nizhegorодsk fair in 1896, but the merchants didn't accept it, and later the Vrubil work vanished for an entire 50 years. It was found during the reconstruction of the Bolshoi Theater in 1956 under a pile of old decorations, and hence such a sad condition of the layer of its colors. Fortunately, another 40 years of hanging, when the panneau finally ended up in the gallery, it was at least unrolled and straightened. The Tretyakov restoration is under the direction of Alexei Petrovich Kovalov, did everything possible, and only now the final restoration may begin, because in order to restore the Princess of Dreams, because of the enormity of the canvas, the area is almost 90 square meters, this can only be done when the panneau hangs vertically and everything can be seen. With confessions of love, gifts and bouquets of flowers, this morning began for many people in the entire world. Today is the celebration of all those in love, the day of St. Valentine. According to the ancient belief, the first maiden whom a youth met this day is to become his destiny, his Valentine. In the entire world on this day, it's traditional to give our hearts to each other, and even in the form of chocolate or a greeting card. In Russia, for now, this holiday is not traditional. Today's problems leave no mood for romance. And yet, sooner or later, national conflicts will subside, a comfortable life will come, and we will only be excited and nervous only about one thing, and that will be love. And now, let the great power of love help us to withstand all the greatest tribulations. Turgenev had said it, only through it, through love, is life sustained and continued. With this, I bid you farewell, and in a few seconds, Ilya Kukin will continue the program with the sports news. All the best. Good evening. At the track and field tournament, the Russian Winter, which during these moments is being held in the Moscow Army Team's Manege, a new world record has been set. Its author is the 4-time world champion in speed walking, Mikhail Shennikov. And now the high accomplishment on the 5-kilometer distance for indoors is equal to 18 minutes and 7 seconds. And just a few seconds ago, we received more news about another world record set by Al Johnson from the United States on the distance 110 meters with hurdles 13.34. 4. In the Italian Antwerp, today the World Biathlon Championships started. The first number of the program are team races. For the men, this distance is 10 kilometers. The world champions are the Norwegian team. The Russians, who are with a renewed team, are only in 4th place, despite the fact that the Russian team had been in the lead in the 1st and 3rd races. Our athletes were undermined by imprecise shooting. The same trouble awaited the women's Russian team. Mistakes set it back to 10th place. And the victors of the team race on the 7.5-kilometer distance was also the team of Norway. News for chess fans. Gato Kamsky, in completing the 6th match, held another victory over Valery Salov. In the semi-final match, the rivals in the FIDE version. The score was 5-1 for him. For victory in the match, Kamsky needs only half a point. With a successful start in Milan at the tennis tournament, the Milan Indoor, the Russian players. Evgeny Kafelnikov in 2 sets beat the Czech Karl Novacek. Alexander Volkov, also in 2 sets, overcame a more serious opponent, the 7th seed of the tournament, the Australian Jason Stoltenberg. And finally, NHL news. In the last matches, Winnipeg is doing very well, and that's Alexei Zhamnov's team. He brought his team another victory in Dallas, 7-4. Zhamnov scored a goal and made 3 successful passes. A 10th goal in the season was scored by Herman Titov from Calgary. Good evening. An Atlantic cyclone, which has brought warm and humid air to the north of the European part of Russia, now is situated over the Barents Sea. Its further path is to the east, in the zone of atmospheric fronts connected with it in the Nenetsk Autonomous District, the Republic of Komi, in the Volga-Vyatsk region. It will remain cloudy with some patches of snow and blizzards during the day, -4 to 9 degrees. In the Murmansk-Arkhangelsk district in the Vologda area, in a belt of high pressure, it will be cloudy. By the end of the evening, snow will begin, temperatures from -4 to +1. In the northwestern region, in the Baltic countries, the Kaliningrad district in Belarus, unfavorable weather with wet snow and rain. The reason for that is an atmospheric front which is connected with the cyclone over the north of England. During the day, 0 +5. In the Kaliningrad district, as high as +8 degrees. In the central region, some weak precipitation, +1 to 4. That same atmospheric front will influence the weather in the western regions of Ukraine and in Moldova. Here, brief rain will fall during the day, +5 to 10 degrees. In the central Chernozem area in the east of Ukraine, central Lower Volga, in the Rostov district, and in the northern Caucasus, in a belt of high pressure, it will be cloudy, but there will be some clear patches of sun. On the central and lower Volga, -1 to 6 in the central Chernozem area, and in the east of Ukraine, +1 to 6 in the Rostov district, Krasnodar, Stavropol, rim areas as high as +10 degrees. In Chechnya and Ingushetia, +3 to 6 degrees. In northern Ossetia and Dagestan, it's 2 or 3 degrees warmer than that, and around Tuapse and Sochi, it's as high as +13 degrees. In the republics beyond the Caucasus, dry, sunny weather will continue. In Georgia, Azerbaijan, +8 to 13. It's a little cooler in Armenia, 0 +5. In St. Petersburg, cloudy with periods of precipitation during the day, 0 +3. The sky over Moscow tomorrow will be knit with clouds. There will be some light precipitation in the morning, some fog. The roads will be icy at night around 0 during the day, +2 to 4. Today is the day of St. Valentine. The folk Russian calendar is silent on this occasion, but in the opinion of forecasters, if this day you smile more frequently and give flowers to your beloved, the entire year will be joyous, and we wish you to be loved and happy. Goodbye.